All right. Well, thank you for joining us on this hoot where we talk about technology in general. Um, I would say the last few have been about um, kind of DevOps and CI/CD type things with Envoy and with Service Mesh. Some previous to that with Yuval, we've had a lot of deep dive into Envoy type sessions, especially Envoy's architecture and that kind of thing. And in this one today, we're super excited to have John Howard from Google. John, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm John. I am a software engineer at Google. I've been working on the Istio project for almost 2 years now, in really a variety of areas, but lately I've been mostly focusing on the networking, especially Istio and the control plane.
Awesome. Definitely glad to have you. And we are today going to talk about, well, we originally planned to talk about Istio 1.8 and how it is awesome and it was just released, but that's not the case, right? Do you want to give just a quick little update on what's happening with the release?
Yeah, we just found a few small regressions in some of the Envoy parts, and so we're working on fixing those. We have some fixes in the works, which we're hoping will land soon and give us, I think the 16th was the new target, but that may slip back a few more days depending on how fast the code reviews go. But hopefully it should be out pretty soon.
Yeah, really soon, and this is keeping in with the pretty consistently quarterly releases, right? The last one came out, I think, in August, the Istio 1.7, and in that, we did one of these kind of what's new in Istio hoots here at Solo. We had Dan Berg on to discuss that. So it's about to come. It's almost here. And what we're going to do, instead of saying, "Hey, this is what's been released," we're going to say, "Hey, this is what's upcoming in the release, hopefully next week." So this is the preliminary website. If you go to preliminary.istio.io, you can get.
Quick question before we get too far. On my screen, it says we are in a practice session. Did we start the webinar?
Yes, you all are live streaming on YouTube.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Good question, though. Otherwise, we'd be talking to ourselves. Yeah. So if you go to preliminary.istio.io, you can see the next version, the docs that are in progress. And in this case, it's 1.8. But we're going to even be looking at a particular PR from the 1.8, which is the 1.8 release notes PR. So eventually, when this goes live, if you come to the Istio site, you should be able to click on news and find the different release announcements. The 1.8 is here in this particular PR, just so we can help, so we can take a look at it. Let's look at the change notes and look at some of the stuff that's coming. So if you look at the change notes, once it's been released, you should see the list of different features and bug fixes and that kind of stuff that have been improved in this release. Now, this is still very much in flux and very much in progress. So don't mind the different formatting and maybe other glitches that you might see here. But there are a handful of really interesting new features and capabilities. Some of them aren't new, some of them are reprisals. And we'll talk about that. But if you go through this list, I would say there's a handful that stand out to me that I'm interested in. The first one being Helm support is coming back. And I think that's backed by popular demand, we could say. John, do you want to say anything about maybe how we got into that situation, or what Helm support will look like now in Istio 1.8?
Yeah, so we previously, back in the day, we had only Helm was really the only installation method, and then we had a lot of users that were interested in an operator or a more integrated experience with Istio Cuddle, and so we kind of shifted focus there. where I think they're really useful. Like Istio Cuddle install adds a lot of things that Helm doesn't, because it's focused on Istio, right? It's not a generic tool. But at the same time, we got a lot of feedback from users that have every single application in their cluster supported with Helm. And so adding something else is tricky. And so based on that, we're adding back support for Helm. And this is really mostly around just a support and documentation change, because if you were a developer, you would have noticed that the Istio Cuddle and operator actually built on top of Helm. So we actually always had Helm charts there. They were just not set up in a way that was easy to use or documented. So now we've seen the demand, so we're adding it back, and we're hoping to get some more feedback on how people like this, how it compares to Istio Cuddle, and hopefully it's anyone who was potentially blocked or struggling to adopt Istio because of the lack of Helm support is now pretty happy with this change.
Yeah, definitely. Like John said, the Helm was being used under the covers, but the charts weren't being very publicized. And the kind of the approach to the charts is almost a layered approach, right? We start with a base that gets installed, and then from there you can install additional capabilities in different charts. And there's also the so that's a way that's coming that's a little bit more supported, a little bit more we'll put a user experience, a Helm user experience around it. But like John said, there's other ways to install Istio as well that have been supported over the last few releases, like the operator. There's quite a few people using the operator, or using Istio Cuddle, which under the covers kind of uses the operator, or at least to generate some of the YAML files. Isn't that right, John? What did you say?
Yeah, they're all kind of using the same source
Right.
of truth, and they're all kind of layered on top of each other.
Yep. So when Istio 1.8 comes out, you will have this install with Helm option here, and you can, it'll walk you through doing installs and doing upgrades and all that good stuff that you would expect with Helm. So another feature that is pretty exciting. Actually, let's come back to the release notes here. Is under security and integrating with external CAs. So that's one that I know people have been kind of interested in and excited about, but it comes in an experimental mode in Istio 1.8. Is that something, John, you can give us a little more color on?
Yeah, I think I agree. This is definitely something I'm very excited about. It's still pretty early stage, I would say, because not only is our support for it early, but it's also depending on a pretty new Kubernetes API. So for some context, like today, there's mostly one CA supported, which is the Istio or formerly Citadel CA, and you can bring your own root certificate to that, but it's still using Istio to do all the signing and provisioning of certificates. There's also some support for Google CA, but there's no other way for other CAs to integrate, and there was, first of all, no implementations, but there was also no clear way to actually do that integration. So what we've added here is Kubernetes has a new API that's actually a certificate sign request API. And they just merged this to GA, I think in Kubernetes 1.19. It's pretty recent. So it's a fairly new API as well. And basically what this will allow is that instead of directly going to Istio and doing the CSR with our own custom Istio API that other CAs like Vault or others don't implement, we'll be using the standard Kubernetes CA and then CSR API, and then any CAs that implement that, which we're expecting will be hopefully quite a few, will be able to be the CA for your mesh. So all of the MTLS certificates will be signed by the CA, and all they have to do is interact with this well-known Kubernetes API. So it's still fairly early, so the integration ecosystem isn't that large, but we have seen Cert Manager has quite a few CAs that are implementing this. I think they have like Vault and Venefi, maybe. There's a few coming up. So it's pretty early, but I think it's very exciting because now, if you already have an existing CA, you don't have to deal with all the security headaches of what it means to introduce another one into your cluster. So I'm pretty excited about this and where it's going to go in the future.
So this is an experimental feature, just for the folks who are maybe as familiar with the way Istio kind of labels the life cycle of its features. Could you just say a couple words about experimental feature?
Yeah, so generally we have experimental, then alpha, beta, and the stable. And as they progress up that chain, have been more tested in both our automated testing and by users. There's more documentation. Like I'm not entirely sure of the state of this one, but oftentimes we have experimental features that are just brand new, hot off the presses. They don't really have documentation, minimal testing. We just want to get them in the hands of a few users that are trying to test the bleeding edge stuff. And all experimental features are off by default. So we're just trying to get early feedback while we're still kind of working on them. Then as they start to stabilize, we start bringing them to alpha, beta stage. Once something's in beta, it's usually pretty solid, like used in production by people, but we haven't committed necessarily that we're not going to change anything for extended periods of time. The main stable things in Istio right now are the really core APIs like virtual service. That's been around for many years. So I'm sure by the end of this, we'll discuss what beta means quite a bit with some of the other changes like VMs and multi-cluster. So.
Awesome, thank you, because that's an important caveat to some of the stuff that we're going to cover here in this kind of what's coming into Istio 1.8 is sort of experimental or alpha, and we definitely want to call that out. But nevertheless, these are things that people are really looking forward to, and we do want people to get hands-on with it and definitely provide feedback and kind of influence. Since experimental and I believe alpha also, we're not settled on those APIs or even user experience, right? So we want people to come and give feedback and improve that. So right, we're really interested in that. Definitely a lot of bug fixes and even some lower level things like people using the Envoy filter, giving different operations that we can adjust the underlying Envoy config a little bit with a little bit more leeway. There's this one right here about the gateway, and the gateway getting its certificates from the control plane. Now, in the previous releases, I believe the gateway was getting its certificates very similarly to the rest of the sidecars in the mesh. Can you give us a little bit update on how this has changed?
Yeah, so there's actually two different types of certificates the gateway would use. Like a normal workload just gets the MTLS certificates to communicate with MTLS to other sidecars in the mesh. And the gateway does that as well, but it also is serving external traffic with credentials that you bring yourself to terminate your external TLS traffic. And so those certificates previously were read from the gateway using Kubernetes secrets. So it was connecting to the API server, requesting the secrets. And there were some issues with that approach. For the main one is that the gateway is exposed to the internet, so it's this public-facing thing, which is always a security risk potentially. And so it's always our goal for the things that are most publicly exposed to minimize their access as a defense in depth mechanism. And so part of this is moving how those are read out of the gateway. So now the gateway will not have privileges to read secrets, and instead it's going to fetch them from Istio, just like it fetches all of its other configuration. So this means that if someone were to somehow compromise the gateway, they wouldn't have any elevated privileges anymore. And instead, it's all centralized in Istio. This also, in the short term, it's not a huge change for users, really. In fact, it's designed to be completely transparent if you're not paying very close attention. But it's going to introduce some options in the future. So similar to the previous one about external CAs, there's been a lot of requests to be able to fetch certificates from other stores than Kubernetes secrets, like say Vault or Google Cloud and AWS also have their own secret stores. And so by centralizing this in Istio, it makes that a lot easier because we don't need to give all these permissions to the gateway and add all these client libraries for all these different services into the gateway. Instead, it's all done in Istio, or we can even go directly to an external server. And so this opens up a lot of doors. Another one is also being able to read potentially certificates from other namespaces, whereas it would be unwise to have the gateway have secret read access to the entire cluster, just as a security best practices. Once we've now moved that into Istio, that becomes something that's tenable. So it's not possible today in 1.8, but a lot of these are just laying the groundwork for future improvements. So I'm pretty excited about this, especially the fact that it is completely backwards compatible with the old method. And so unlike some of our previous changes like Istio and Telemetry v2, in theory, you should not even notice this happening and just get the improvements. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about this one. I did a lot of this work, so I'm a bit biased.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely what that enables, and both in terms of security posture and extension is definitely something we've heard from folks who adopt Istio. They would like to see this go in this direction, which is awesome. Now, there is one more that I'm really excited about. Again, I guess I'm excited about all the experimental features, but the DNS capabilities that are coming to Istio, specifically to kind of help out in areas of adoption like using VMs with Istio, using cross cluster routing with multi-cluster Istio, and even some single cluster type use cases with TCP. So when this comes out, if we click on blog, we should see a blog that describes how we're going to be pushing some of the DNS resolution capabilities for those services that live inside the mesh to the sidecar. So this is so the blog is useful to read. Definitely read it when it comes out. But I don't know, John. We were looking through a different issue with VMs, but this is what I was trying to get to, was showing this. Is there anything you want to say about this capability? This is definitely something that's pretty welcomed and pretty exciting.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think this is the most exciting one. I think this is going to open up the door for a lot of different things. Today running a VM is quite challenging because you have to deal with all this different DNS issues, whether it's exposing your kube DNS or some other solution. We've seen a lot of people do different things here. So it's great that we're finally going to have just an out-of-box experience where DNS just works, and you can use you can call Kubernetes services on a VM just like you would in a pod. But VMs are not the only use case for this, which is why I'm particularly excited about it, because it solves a lot of things. So one thing we see a lot is that people want to communicate with TCP services, typically databases from what I've seen, and they have service entries. And just based on with the TCP traffic, we don't have a lot of information to route on. Like with HTTP or even TLS, we have the host header or the SNI header. But with TCP, we pretty much just have the IP address and the port. And so if we don't know the IP addresses that are the potential destinations, like we do in Kubernetes, because we know all the service IPs, it becomes extremely challenging to do the routing, because we essentially can only route on the port. And so if you have two MySQL databases, they're probably on the same port. And now we don't have any way to figure out where the traffic should be going for those. So what we have done with this DNS is, instead of using the real DNS response from the server, we'll inject a fake DNS response, and then the proxy will understand how to handle that. And so now we've given these previously unknown IP addresses, we've given them a known one, and now we can route based on that. So you can have, we basically no longer have any of these conflicts where we don't understand where to route the traffic to, and we have issues where you can have basically a single port in the entire mesh, which is really painful for some users. So I'm pretty happy about this as well. And then just in general as well, like we are now caching DNS and serving it locally, essentially. And so we see a lot of users, like even outside of Istio, on large Kubernetes clusters, start to have issues with DNS and scaling. And so a lot of people have started deploying like a node local DNS, which is basically, it's a very similar concept to this, but running on a node instead of in a sidecar. And it's fairly complicated to set up for some users, but it offers substantial performance benefits. And so we're kind of taking that and moving it to the extreme, because now all DNS is resolved over localhost. It's much faster. And I say this with a huge caveat that we have not done extensive performance testing, as this is experimental. But we are hoping that it will be much faster and should substantially reduce the load on the kubedns, because all internal traffic is going to be resolved by the local DNS agent. And then very few traffic will be actually forwarded to the upstream kubedns. That would only be things that you're trying to resolve that Istio itself doesn't know about.
Yeah, exactly. So from here, I want to show you what it kind of looks like in an Istio installation. And I think, so I don't really, honestly, I was thrashing around a little bit here in this kube cluster. We do have Istio installed that we can see here. And I don't think we have our application installed. No. All right, so let me just show you. We're gonna install probably just the HTTP bin app. We'll do latest 1.8. HTTP bin. But actually, what we're going to do is we're going to manually inject the sidecar. Just because it'll become clear in a second. But so if I inject the
I think you have the wrong Istio cuddle version.
That's right. There we go. Now let's apply that. Now we should see the pod come up, and we got two containers that should be coming up. Now the reason why I wanted to do this way is I want to actually edit the security context. So we're gonna take a look at the IP tables rules here and see exactly how this is all working. Come here. We'll give that a second to come up, hopefully. And so when the app is running inside of the pod here, and you know how it makes calls out to external services, Istio will trap the traffic and force it to go through the sidecar. And in most of the cases, it's going through the Envoy proxy. And then Envoy can apply its magic as configured by the Istio control plane. But if we, if you try to make a call to a service that either lives in the mesh that is unknown, or maybe you've created a service entry for and might not have an IP for it or a routable IP for it. In the past, we've done things like hack up the DNS stub resolver for kubedns, or introduce a separate core DNS component into Istio so that it can read the service entries and kind of provide the resolution for those DNS names. But as we were just discussing, now we're able to do that from within the pod. So the normal IP tables rules in Istio traps the application traffic as we know. So in this case here, coming to this is coming in, so we redirect to 15.06, or rather the other way. It's coming in, it goes to 15.008, going out through 15.006. But now we're also trapping any of the DNS requests. So it'll go first to the Istio DNS proxy, or the agent that's running in the sidecar, and then it will try to look up the services based on what that caching DNS proxy knows. And then if it's for a host name or something that it doesn't know about, it'll still delegate, as in the way DNS works, to the resolver that's been set up for the system. So you can, from an application standpoint, you don't have to change anything in your application. The DNS capabilities will be available just by using the sidecar there. Is there anything you wanted to add, John?
Nope, that covers it pretty well, I think.
Awesome. So the last part that I was thinking is that Mixer's gone, right? Completely gone. Is that right?
Yep, it is. It's been deprecated for a couple of releases, I think, but now it is officially removed. So you no longer be able to install that. And the same applies for the telemetry add-ons as well, like Prometheus, Grafana, Kiali. So those are still 100% supported. We just are no longer installing them as part of Istio Cuddle or the operator. So that was, I think, deprecated in 1.6, and now it's been fully removed as well.
That's right. Now, is this one might be a curveball? Is Istio, the proxy, is that being built on Envoy, a specific release of Envoy, or is it just upstream master Envoy?
Yeah, so we have been trying in the past, I want to say 3 or 4 releases now, to match an Envoy release. And so we'll generally take that release and we'll apply a few patches on top of it. But it's generally pretty much the same. So I think they're on 1.16 or 1.15. I sometimes get them all. There's a lot of versions going around. So we were built on a stable Envoy version, and then just a couple patches on top as we see things that Istio specifically needs. We'll backward those. And then, in our pre-releases, we're building just straight from the head of master. But then once we're ready to cut a release, we stick to a stable one to ensure that when security fixes come out and such, that we can make sure those are applied.
Right, and the reason why I was asking is because with Mixer gone, telemetry v2 kind of kicking in, filling that role. The telemetry stuff was written, parts of it with WebAssembly, and upstream Envoy WebAssembly has kind of been merged into the head or master branch, and so that we'll start to expect to see. As some of the blogs that came out in 1.5 and 1.6, that as more people kick the tires on that, and that starts to mature a little bit more, especially for writing your own filters and that kind of thing, that extend the vision around extending Istio and so on is alive and well.
Yeah, definitely. So we don't actually support bringing your own just plain old Istio or plain old Envoy today, because some of our filters, we have custom ones, I think our authorization or authentication one. But in the future, we're hoping that you could just take the plain old Envoy build, and then all the Istio extensions are all dynamic WebAssembly extensions, which could be added by users just the same. So the Istio extensions would really not be special, other than perhaps they'd be bundled in. So that would be really exciting, and we're getting closer there, but we're not quite there yet. So. Yep.
And for those of you that are following along what we're doing here at Solo, that is a really big and exciting part that we're working with our customers on right now to help kind of harden and both the actual production usage as well as the developer experience around it. And so I guess while I'm at it, WebAssembly Hub is a project that we've been working on to, if we come over here to the docs, to kind of simplify that experience around bootstrapping WASM-based projects, loading them into things like Istio and that kind of thing. So definitely keep an eye on that. And like I said, the Istio upstream is using core, Envoy upstream, especially now that the WASM stuff is upstream in Envoy. We expect a lot of good stuff to come out of that. Yeah, I mean, the release notes are somewhere here. But are there any other things that you wanted to point out here, John, while we have you?
Yeah, I guess one other thing that it may have, I'm not even sure I saw it in the release notes because we got it in just at the last minute, and it's very experimental as well, is we added auto registration for virtual machines. So today, if you on Kubernetes, you just spin up a pod and Istio knows about it because it's, the API service providing all this information. But for a VM, you start your VM and none of the other pods in the mesh or other VMs know about that VM, right? So we need a way to register that VM. And historically, that's been done through, in the past, services and endpoints, and then service entry, and then workload entry was recently added in 1.7. But all of it was still manual. You still had to go and create some resource that says, this is the IP address, here's some labels associated with it. Which maybe wasn't too bad if you have some VM that's around for a long time. But if you have something like auto-scaling VMs, now things get really challenging because you have to have some sort of controller or something. I'm not really sure how people would do it. It'd be quite challenging to handle. So what we've added in 1.8 is a way so that when the VM connects to Istio, it's going to auto-register itself. So based on the fact that it's connected to Istio, we know that it's this VM in the mesh, and then other pods can start connecting to it automatically. And in the future, we're going to extend this to also have actual health checking. And so like on Kubernetes, you have your readiness robes that you can define on your application. We'll add something similar to the VMs. And so this will be more than just kind of this blind faith that if there's a connection to Istio, then the VM's ready. We'll actually have active health checking. So it should get the experience much closer to what it is like to run a pod on Kubernetes. So the health checking part will hopefully come in 1.9. This is here in 1.8. It's still experimental. So we're hoping to iron some of these out. So kind of the overarching goal of VMs and to some extent multi-cluster is, in this 1.8 release, we've added a lot of the groundwork, this automated registration, DNS stuff, and soon health checking. And then we're going to be working to kind of solidify this, make sure we have the proper documentation, testing, scalability. And then in 1.9, we're hoping to have VMs just be this really locked down feature that's declared as beta, and that is really hopefully a much better user experience than in the past. So we, right now it's still a bit up in the air. It's still a bit challenging to use and get all the pieces together. But we're hoping that by the end of the year or early next year that this is going to be a great user experience, and I'm pretty confident that we'll get there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm pretty confident that Istio will be, the VM experience will be exceptional because we have a lot of folks in the ecosystem and the community and so on that are, they have Kubernetes, but they have a lot more VMs, right? And they have their workloads running on VMs, and there's that migration for those that are migrating is, it takes a little bit of time. But Istio has always kind of been, Kubernetes first, but not only, right? And we've seen the groundwork being formed for better VM support. And in the not too distant future, we should see, this will be first class for those users that are in that scenario with a lot of services running on VMs. Now, I'll just throw this out there. Other service meshes have kind of said, we're going to focus on VMs or, that kind of thing. I would say that from an Istio perspective, Istio's been baking, let's say, for 3 years, and Istio's quite mature in all of these other areas. And now we're extending those capabilities to include VMs. And so I just wanted to point that out. If you're looking at VM support in your service mesh, Istio is a very compelling solution for that. So, John, that's all I had or wanted to cover. I definitely appreciate you taking some time to come chat with us and share what's happening in Istio 1.8.
Yeah, thank you. Always happy to talk about this stuff, and I'm excited to hear people's feedback on 1.8. I think it's probably by far our best release yet, which is always a good thing to improve.
Yes.
But I think it's much better than previous ones. We focused a lot on stability. We talked a lot here about these experimental features, which but I think that gives a false impression. Like the core focus on 1.8 for the past 3 or 4 months has been all about stability. We fixed countless number of bugs, made performance improvements, and so I think that it will be a great release.
Yep, agreed. Definitely go check out 1.8 when it comes out. Pop into the Slack or the Discuss mailing list if you have questions or feedback. And yeah, let's keep it going. I think Istio is doing really good things here. So with that, again, thanks for joining. Thank you, John, and we'll do it again next time.
Thank you.